learning well-being. Now, this is part of our Unchain Your Brain framework. It's about really starting to love this thing that you have up here. It's absolutely incredible. It's more powerful than the most powerful supercomputer on earth. They know more about our solar system than they do about this thing that's just kind of between your ears. It's amazing. And we only feel our brain when we've hurt our brain, when we've got a headache or migraine or we've bumped it on something. Apart from that, it's just there doing this wonderful instinctive thing. And what I want to talk to you today about, and maybe leave you with a few exercises you can do in your own time, uh, is about how the brain is this sponge. And it's an instinctive sponge. It's not about studying, it's about learning. Now, there's a difference between those two. But I've put SpongeBob there because, literally, I mean, that's what we have. We have this sponge in our brain, which is made up of a lot of water and a lot of these neural connections. And it's processing millions of pieces of sensory information every second. And it's awesome. And what we're trying to do is survive and thrive, especially when it comes to our revision and our learning. And those exams and assessments. So I want to give you some tips today. So you can be more like SpongeBob in the corner there. You can go, ah, and every time you think of your brain and you think of learning, it creates this kind of magical rainbow with unicorns flying all over, or maybe not unicorns, but you can have unicorns if you want, but you start to think of your brain and you have a smile on your face. And that's what I want to achieve today. Now, firstly, think of your life, all right? Stag beetles, compare us to them. They only live for 40 days in the summer. We have 740,220 hours on average with our life expectancy in this country, in the UK. How did I work that out? Well, 24 hours times 365 is 8,760. And if you times that by 84 and a half, that's what you get. That's all we have on average in life. And that's pretty good if we live to about, the mid 80s, but it still doesn't seem like much. We're asleep for about 2/7 of our life. Another seventh, we're eating or on the loo, hopefully not at the same time, because that's just weird. And we're also commuting for 1/7. We're staring at some kind of digital screen or interfacing with technology, which is what you're doing now. And also, what else do we have? Well, we have one element which is work, and we have only one segment which is pure time. Now, this final segment, which is filling in now, that's where we put our learning into it, or our studying. And it's about how we perceive this, the things we have to know. And there are things that if we want to do a career, they say you have to know that stuff. You have to be tested on it. You have to be assessed in it, whether it's in an exam, or whether it's on a practical with people observing you, or whether it's just being tested every day on a job. But that 1/7 is about how we use that time so we can put it into and really maximize that 92,120 hours when we'll probably be at work. And work is just a collection of our skills, of our knowledge. As humans, we share 80% of our DNA with a grizzly bear. I think that's quite cool. We share 60% with salmon, and we're 40% the same as many insects. 24% of our genes are the same as that of a wine grape. Now, firstly, there's some maths in there. And the idea of maths being fun to me in school and biology was kind of meh, because I'm an actor. I went down a kind of creative route. But you can become curious about anything. And when you become curious about stuff, you forget what subject it is, because you go deeper than a subject. You just go into these kind of emotional connections in your brain and imagination and creativity. And that's really cool. I also just think it's cool that if you did have too much wine in the future when you're old enough to drink, that if you were incredibly hungover, you can know that a quarter of it is an excuse that's fine because you're 24% anyway a wine grape. But creativity and harmony with STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths, whatever type of a student you are who's watching this, start to think about these two different things. Now, we often don't think that STEM uses the same part of our brain as creators, but it does. There's a university in Singapore, and they did a trial where they taught data analytics and coding to art students, and the art students said that their art improved afterwards. Now, these two things are incredibly linked. So first things first, when it comes to your well-being, okay, don't think you're restricted. Don't think you only use a certain part of your brain, whether you do creative subjects, whether you do STEM. And don't think you can't put the same techniques and the same mindset and attitude into all of it. That SpongeBob you have in your brain, all right, it's using all sorts of connections that fire across your logical thinking and your analytical thinking, and then your human empathy, your emotional, your creative side is all interlinked. For example, Einstein, there he is. Einstein, I don't know why I said sorry. Weird connection in my brain, just firing into something. But Einstein used to play the violin. And his violin was called Lena. How cool is that? And he said the reason he could come up with his equations, these groundbreaking scientific equations that he came up with, he said it was because he used to play the violin first. He used to get his mind into a relaxed frequency. And a lot of your well-being comes from not just when you're trying to study, it comes from those other things you do outside of your study and achieving a balance. Now, here on the left, you'll see Benedict Cumberbatch, a very famous actor. He's Sherlock, he's Doctor Strange in the Avengers, and he's done a lot of stage plays. One of his stage plays, the most challenging role, probably, in history, because of the amount of lines. 1,495 lines you need to learn for Hamlet. That's not in the play, that's just Hamlet's lines. And he has so many speeches which he has to just unfold from his brain. Jay-Z on the right hand side says he hasn't written down a single lyric since his first album in 1996. So how do these two people, these performers, absorb all of these lines on stage that they have to remember under pressure when there's audiences watching them? Do they perform? And these performers, do they learn or do they study? Now, the answer to the first one is yeah, we're all performing. Even you, every time you learn, every time you're in class, every time you are revising or learning on your own, you are doing a kind of performance, a social performance, whether there's people around or not. And when you learn versus study, it changes that performance. Now, if Benedict Cumberbatch and Jay-Z saw their performances as studying, they are studying Hamlet, they're studying their rap lines, there's a blocker there because it doesn't feel as instinctive. We don't like the word studying. Learning is passive, studying is active. It feels like you have to do it, but learning just feels like you're doing it when they're rehearsing and they're immersed in their music in the studio, in that rehearsal room with the lights on stage. It feels instinctive. It's not an acquired process. It's driven by all of their senses, not just intellect. And what you're trying to move towards is these things on the left-hand side. Learning doesn't have to be intellectual. It doesn't have to be by rote, which means you keep repeating the same thing over and over, really unemotional, very rigid, and thinking if you repeat it enough, it's going to go in. Repeating is important enough. Rehearsing, they have to rehearse in the studio, they have to rehearse in the theatre, but us as performers, it's not just by rote. By rote has mainly been the last 300 years that's been in fashion, and that's been a Western development of learning. But it's studying. If we go through history, things were passed down. Knowledge and education was passed down orally. People would be focused, they would be obsessed, they would sit around a campfire and they would learn from their elders. They would absorb all that information with complete focus and then they pass that down. That's not studying, that's doing. That's emotional, and there's instant recall there. So we need to alter our language. And it alters our mindset if we do that. It's a very simple thing. So a lot of your well-being is your confidence to feel like you can study. But remember, we don't call it studying. You can learn. Now, a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, which one do you think sounds nicer? Just have a think. Which one sounds more pleasant to you? Being fixed or having growth? Now, a fixed mindset is where you say you are what you are. You can do it or you can't. You're good at maths or you're not. But a growth mindset is where we're shifting that internal dialogue that we all have with ourselves. And usually what we say internally to ourselves then spills out to other people, like our teachers, our parents, when we go, I can't do it. No, my brain's full. But what we want to move towards is those ones in orange. Think about the tone, everything you say. Yeah. 85% of it is how we say it. So even in your mind, how do you say things to yourself? Do you say it with an optimistic tone or do you say it with a fixed tone? Be optimistic. say to yourself with a smile on your face, even if it's an internal smile, but you say, I can change, I can learn how to do this. I worked hard at that. Never mind about the result. I worked hard, and that's what matters. And knowing every single time you've worked hard at something, it's probably going to improve the next time instead of thinking you just fixed. So the tone we use internally and with others is really important because people mirror your tone. So the tone you use in a learning community, which I'll talk about in a minute, with those other people around you, that energy can infect a whole group. So diction, all right, being clear, slowing down as well, your pace and your diction, saying less to yourself internally, but just going, I can do this.